Call the Platting Board to order. It's June 6th at 6:30 p.m. And the first item on the agenda is a roll call.
Lendl Story,
Here.
Steve Abel,
Here.
Ken Fuller,
Here.
Jody Moses, Daniel Young,
Present.
Brent Cole, Anthony Cange,
Present.
Trevor Edmondson.
Here.
Thank you. We have 6 out of 9, so we have a quorum. Are there any agenda changes or postponements or changes to the agenda that require motion? Hearing and seeing none. Okay. We'll move on to approvals, and the first approvals will be the minutes from May, action summaries. May I have a motion to approve action summaries?
So moved. Oh, I'm on the wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Edmondson, and Mr. Story second. Good try. It's okay. We're all getting synchronized. Okay. Mr. Edmondson, we speak to your motion. Oh, are there any changes or corrections from the board? Hearing and seeing none, these are approved. Special order of business and disclosures. Are there any disclosures tonight? Mr. Edmondson.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button there. In case S11919-1 Murray subdivision, I'd like to disclose that our firm, the Peterson Group, which I work for, often uses Lounsbury and Associates. The consultant that's representing the petitioner on our projects. Just like to state, though, that I have no financial personal interest in the matters before the board in this case, and feel I can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of the board without any personal bias.
Thank you. May I have a motion directing Mr. Edmondson to participate? Mr. Cange, is that your motion? Or Mr. Fuller, did you make the motion? This responder's not.
Yeah, there we go. I pressed the wrong button. Sorry about that.
Okay, let's start over. May I have a motion directing Mr. Edmondson to participate in the case of Murray subdivision? Mr. Cange?
I move to direct Board Member Edmondson to participate in case S1191-1.
Thank you. And Mr. Fuller, did you second that? Thank you. Are there any discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Are there any other disclosures? Mr. Fuller.
Case S119211 for the Bobbage properties. I don't have any particular personal knowledge of the property other than he's a direct competitor of ours in the storage businesses. So yeah, when I first read it, I said, oh, I don't have a problem, but at the same time, I don't think I should go forward without you guys having the option to make a comment.
Thank you. May I have a motion directing Mr. Fuller to participate? Mr. Cole moves. Would you speak to your motion, please?
In the matter of Fairview subdivision extension number 1, tracks 1A and 8B-S-11921, I would move that the member be allowed to participate. He's indicated that he can be fair and objective in the weighing of the evidence, and I have no reason to disbelieve that.
And Mr. Kane seconds. Mr. Fuller, is that accurate that you can be impartial in this matter?
Well, I believe so. We don't conflict. We're on different sides of town, but I just felt that it's necessary that I tell everybody.
Yes, it is
Yes.
good that you disclose. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? Is there any opposition to this motion? The motion passes. You're directed to participate. Mr. Edmondson, did you have another disclosure?
Yeah, I do. In case S11921-1, Fairview Subdivision Extension Number 1, the firm that I work for, the Peterson Group, provides construction services for Cook Inlet Housing Authority, the co-petitioner in this case. We also have a number of land development projects that we are involved with Cook Inlet Housing. Our firm and myself, we have no financial interest in the case. I have no personal interest in the case before the board tonight, and feel like I can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of the board without personal bias, and feel like I could fairly evaluate the case tonight.
Thank you. May I have a motion to direct Mr. Edmondson to participate? Mr. Kange, would you speak to your motion, please?
In regard to case S11921-1, I move to direct Mr. Edmondson to participate in this case. I feel he has no financial interest, either he or his firm, and can participate fairly.
Thank you. Mr. Cole seconds. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Mr. Edmondson, you are directed to participate in the case S11921-1, Fairview Subdivision, extension number 1. Are there any other disclosures? Mr. Cole.
I don't believe that this is a conflict. I'm not sure I even have to bring it up, but I did, as a property owner in the area for S11909-1, I did receive the notice from the petitioner that this was going on in my area. I don't know why it would have caused me to affect my decision-making process, but I just bring it to the chairman's attention.
Thank you. Okay. It's just a disclosure. Are there any other disclosures? I have two disclosures. In the case of S11909-1, Seashack Subdivision Lots 7B1 and 7B2, my company does business with the petitioner's representative, However, we have not worked with the petitioner. We have not worked on this property. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board. I can remain fair and impartial in fact and action as a member of this board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interests will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. May I have a motion directing me to participate? Mr. Cole.
I move that the chair be a part of the discussion and deliberation in case S11909-1 based on the information he's provided, which demonstrates he can be fair and impartial in the sitting on this particular issue.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, are there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, the board directs me to participate in case S11909-1. I also have a disclosure for case S11921-1 Fairview subdivision. My firm has worked in the past for Cook Inlet Housing. I have no familiarity with this project. I have no financial or personal interest in the matter before the board. I can remain impartial in fact and action as a member of this board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interest will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. May I have a motion directing me to participate, please? Mr. Story.
In the case S11921-1, I move to direct Mr. Young to participate in the case.
Mr. King seconds. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, the board directs me to participate. Thank you. Are there any other disclosures? Okay, there are no consent agenda, no pooled consent agenda items. There's no unfinished business, so we'll move to our regular agenda. Okay. The procedures which the public may speak to the Platting Board at its meeting is, after staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Platting Board Rules of Procedure. Petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, have 10 minutes. Rebuttal by the petitioner may be allowed when time has been reserved. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., have 5 minutes, and individuals have 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the board. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record unless a written request is submitted to the Department of Community Development Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or an appeal of the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. The first case is case S11901-1 C-Shack subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request to subdivide one lot into two lots with variances from lot depth and street dedication. The subject property is zoned R3 and is surrounded by multifamily residential uses. To the northeast and southwest of the property is the Alaska Railroad and the Tony Knowles Coastal Trail. The property is located on the northwest corner of 8th Avenue and O Place. 8th Avenue is designated as a country lane in the OSHNP and is improved to local urban standards. AMC 2185 Table A requires that a minimum 60-foot right-of-way for residential streets, including country lanes. West 8th Avenue currently is only 50, the West 8th Avenue right-of-way is only 50 feet wide. O Place is a 20-foot alley and is improved to required standards for an alley and is the required width for an alley. I'll now speak to the variance findings. The first is there are special circumstances or conditions affecting the property that strict application of the subdivision regulations would be impractical. Staff finds that the standard is met. Regarding the depth variance, the depth of the existing lot is already 80 feet, so this subdivision is not creating the need for the variance. Regarding the variance from right-of-way dedication, the right-of-way surrounding this site are all 40 to 50 feet wide. West Avenue is already built to municipal standards and is adequately serving the surrounding neighborhoods. The second finding, the granting of a specific variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or interest to the other property. Staff finds that the standard is met. The variance will have no impact on surrounding properties in the area. The tract has access to water and sewer. West 8th Avenue is built to municipal standards, adequately serving the surrounding neighborhood. Fire and private development have no objection to granting the variance. The third finding, such variances will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. Staff finds that this standard is met. The minimum lot depth is intended to provide an orderly subdivision of land, to provide a basic standard of lot dimension to ensure adequate area for required setbacks and a building footprint. The excessive width of the existing lot at 260 feet provides adequate area for two parcels. In addition, the property is designated for 21 to 35 dwelling units per the comprehensive plan, and currently the lot is only used as a single-family residence. So subdividing the lot may result in subsequent development and utilization of the land in conformity with the comprehensive plan. Regarding the variance from right-of-way dedication, the intent of this standard is to ensure that all local roads have uniform width and meet the current and projected need for traffic, pedestrian circulation, utilities, and snow storage. In areas that were platted prior to zoning, where the municipality has less right-of-way than currently required by code, key considerations include if the street itself is constructed to municipal standards, if the street is adequately serving local circulations, and the likelihood that the municipality will acquire a contiguous area to reasonably expand the right-of-way. For this site, the street itself is constructed to municipal standards. We have a 37-foot constructed street with sidewalks on both sides of the road. And it is adequately serving the local community, and it is unlikely that we will acquire additional right-of-way to make any improvements. The fourth finding, that undue hardship would result from strict application, strict compliance with the subdivision regulations. We also find that this standard is met given the fact that the existing lot does not have the minimum depth. Strict application would prevent the lot from ever being further subdivided, And given the large size of the lot, the owner would bear an undue hardship if prevented from subdividing the parcel. Dedicating an additional 5 feet would further restrict the development potential of the lots and reduce the lot depth even further. So therefore, the department recommends approval of variances from AMC 2180 300B, 2180 10, and 2185 Table A. We also recommend approval of the plat for 18 months subject to the 4 conditions on pages 8 and 9 of the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of staff?
I have one question. Ms. Iverson, any other conversations with Traffic Division as far as why they didn't provide justification?
Through the chair, I did follow up with the Traffic Department, and I did not get any justification.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of staff? Mr. Cole.
Through the chair, so when you said, I assume that you're talking about page 42 of our package.
Through the chair, page 42 represents the written comments supplied by the Traffic Division regarding this variance.
And you didn't get any response when you called them about this?
I followed up and I asked for clarification on, based on this submittal, and I did not get any further details. In addition, I felt like this language was rather confusing, to be honest, and I also did not get any further clarification. And
So I'm just trying to figure out what you mean by that. Did you actually have a conversation and they tried to explain it to you and you didn't understand it, or nobody got back with you?
I had a conversation with them, yes.
It's not often that we get, you know, the other divisions saying strict application of the provisions of the regulation are not actable, impractical, unreasonable, or undesirable. That's why I kind of wonder. And then we've got a directly contrary finding that you've made in yours.
Through the chair, I rely on the departments such as traffic engineering and private development to provide me technical justification, such as the street is this width, or this is what the circumstances are that would require. And then from that, go to making the determination about whether or not it is impractical or unreasonable or undesirable. I also thought it was somewhat odd that the traffic department was also leaping to making this kind of determination.
Is my understanding correct that this was at one time one lot and then it was subdivided into 2 lots? Or it was 2 lots and then subdivided into 1?
Through the chair, that's correct. In 2005, on page 66, that shows what the subdivision was before that, and I also believe that it was 2 lots. I probably have that in the
And I guess we'll find out here in a second, but are you aware of whether the owner was the same owner who subdivided this into 1 lot and now wants to subdivide it back into 2 lots?
Through the chair, I'm not certain about that.
If it was the same owner, would that owner have bought kind of knowing what the situation was? And would that affect your analysis on whether the 4 factors for the variance have been met? And I apologize if that's a confusing question.
Do you need clarification of the question?
No, I'm just taking a moment. Through the chair, I think that I don't think it would influence my decision in looking at the standards. I find that the standards are met whether or not the property owner, what they had in mind when they purchased the property and what their intent when they purchased the property may have been different than the current market conditions and what they would like to do now. So that factor does not influence whether or not they meet the standards.
And finally, my last question is, would they have gone through this same process when they subdivided it back into one? And would we have access to that document and that application that was filed back in 2005 when this was subdivided back into one?
Through the chair, the standards would have been the same in 2005. They did not get it did not get a variance at that time, and that's why we're here to clarify that.
But when they subdivided it, would they have had to come back and apply for that changing of the plat at that time before this board?
Through the chair, I believe that this was a short plat. It did not come before the board.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of staff? Hearing none and seeing none, we'll open the hearing for public testimony. And again, I'm going to remind you the petitioner has 10 minutes and may ask to save time for rebuttal. The groups have 5 minutes and individuals have 3 minutes. I would like everybody who comes forward to, before you testify, to state your name and spell your last name, please. Will the petitioner's representative please proceed?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, planning staff, and concerned members of the public. My name is Tom Dreyer. I am with S4 Group, and I represent the petitioner tonight, Bootleggers LLC, owned by Mr. Sky Carver, who is in the audience tonight. And I also happen to live on the eastern half of this lot in the little house that was built in 1952. This lot definitely has an interesting history, and I'll see along the west property line here, pre-earthquake, it was actually a right-of-way. And you can see the remnants of it are P Street to the south. And so that used to be the front of the lot. And then the earthquake came along, and a bunch of land kind of slipped off into the sea there. And the railroad came in, as you can see here, and sliced off a chunk there for their right-of-way. And then there was this remaining triangular piece here that you see that was on that plat. I think it was on page 66 or somewhere back in there. So after the earthquake, there was 2 lots. And then in 2005, Mr. Carver bought both of these lots, this lot here and this lot here. And it was 2005, and the economy was rolling along, and everybody was building big condominium projects. The lot combined So he combined the lot into one to put up a big condo building. The zoning here is R3, as is all the surrounding zoning. As per Title 21, the currently allowed dwelling units on the lot as it sits right now is 15. So you can put up a 15-unit condominium building. The proposed two lots that you see here, 7B1, which is on the front towards the railroad, it is 8,800 square feet and will be able to handle 5 units. And 7B2, where I live right now, well, it was 9,300 square feet, and that can handle 5 dwelling units as per Title 21 for a total of 10. The current and proposed setbacks remain the same. Lot size is a standard Bootlegger's Cove lot is 50 feet by 140 feet, for the average lot size being around 7,000 square feet. The two lots that we are creating here are about 9,000 square feet apiece. The average width of a standard Bootlegger's Cove lot is 50 feet, and ours are going to be 120 to 140 feet wide. So the total streetscape that we have is about 270 feet or so, 260, 270 feet. Also, it might be interesting to note the new proposed Title 21, which of course isn't adopted yet, has a minimum lot depth of 80 feet. Well, I'd like to reserve any leftover time for rebuttal. Street widths, here's the bluff line for Bootlegger's Cove, this dark line here. All these streets, all the green streets, are virtually all the streets in Bootlegger's Cove below the bluff. They're all 50 feet or less. Many are 40, some are 20. This area along 8th Avenue, and actually the road that kind of angles along here that you guys have probably all driven down to view the ocean and Mount Susitna, is actually classified as a country lane. And in the OSH&P, a country lane can actually be 50 feet wide, 50 to 60 feet, according to the terrain. So, say if the country lane is going through a mountainous area, then it could be 60 feet, but if it's in a flatter area, and this is all explained in the OSH&P, it's fine to be 50 feet, depending on the cuts and fills. Here, there's basically no cuts and fills, just following the terrain and fairly flat. So I have a pretty good feeling that back at that last plat, that they decided that they didn't need a variance for this. And frankly, I don't think I need a variance for this either. But I just went ahead and applied for it because there's new people in the municipality, and you read one thing, the OSH&P says, yeah, 50 feet's fine. Title 21, if you read in a certain way, says it should be 60. So I figured we'd just clear it up, go ahead and just submit the variance and be done with it. The density, as far as complying with the Anchorage Comp Plan, the Anchorage Comp Plan in this area is 21 to 35 DUAs. The new Title 21, that's not, of course, law yet, is proposing 15 to 40 DUAs, and the existing DUAs is 36. In our proposed, at the maximum 10 DUAs, 5 per lot, is 24 DUAs. So with that, I would like to reserve any time left over for rebuttal, and we do agree and concur with all the conditions put on by the Planning Department shown on page 8 and 9 of the packet.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes and 49 seconds left for rebuttal. Are there questions of the petitioner?
Thank you.
Are there any questions of the petitioner? I have one, Mr. Dreyer. What are the height restrictions in R3?
35 feet.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there any other questions? Thank you. We'll now open the hearing to public testimony. Is there anyone wishing to testify? Is there anyone at all wishing to testify in this matter? It's now hearing and seeing none. It's time for rebuttal.
Thank you. One of the big reasons here for objecting to that 5 foot is that with this lot, you have a 20-foot front yard setback and we have a 20-foot rear setback. So that leaves us only 80 or 40 feet in between to build the units. And if you have a 24-foot wide or deep garage in the front, that leaves you only 16 feet behind the garage for a room. Then you have 4 foot of staircase, so that leaves you only 12 feet, which is okay. That's just enough room. But if you take that 12 feet, say, and subtract another 5 feet, well, then we're down to 7 feet, and just kind of, it really causes a lot of hardship in plans and design and the layout of a house. And I think that's about all I have. I had some response to the people that commented, a couple of the neighbors, but since they didn't show up, I'll just answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Cole.
Were you aware that the traffic division did not support the variance?
Yes.
Did you contact them?
No.
I have nothing more.
Are there any other questions of petitioner? I do. In the public comments, you offered to address those. Would you mind addressing those for us?
Sure. The main issues that they brought up, and I feel for these people just like what happens in a lot of areas when someone builds in front of somebody else in their view. So I did a little study and looked at, okay, say behind, here's this yellow here is the C-Shack lot. I did a study on it, historical, and got the dates of construction. And it happens every single condominium building in there built in front of somebody else at some point in time. Say the neighbor behind me that wrote a couple pages, they built in 1972 about a 35-foot tall building, 30 or 35 or so, and completely blocked the view of a house that was behind it, built in 1950 or 52. And the neighbor to the south that was discussing a view issue, it's the same kind of thing. The condominium building that he lives in is 35 feet tall and has 50 condos in it and stretches from a side yard, or it's about a half a block long or so. And they were actually given an option by the realtor 3 or 4 years ago to buy the parcel. Of course, it's a pretty spendy property. So one thing this may allow, if we could subdivide this as in two, that's going to take the price down a bit, and they might be able to afford to just go ahead and buy that front lot from the petitioner, or maybe buy a view plane over it or something like that. So anyway, the only people that have guaranteed views in the entire Bootleggers Cove area are the people that are buying right up next to the railroad track. That's just the way it is. Thank you.
Mr. Dreyer, in some of the comments, there was a comment about emergency access, and the staff found that this was adequate. What's your opinion on the emergency access and how this would, development would impact that?
I saw no impact because, for one, the road here is actually built a little bit wider than standards here, because I think the standard is 33 feet, and this road, for some reason, I'm not sure why, is built about 37 feet wide with sidewalks on both sides. So there's no issue with emergency access there. What one neighbor was talking about was coming down the alley, because the neighbor to the north of the C-Shack, it's a 24-unit condo or apartment building, actually, and they have to come down the alleyway. That's their only access. But it was an unusual situation for them when they came in, because their original frontage slipped off into the sea
Thank you.
from the earthquake.
And one other comment that I noticed was that there were photographs showing the snow encroaching on the alleyway, and I don't see how that relates to this issue in front of us tonight. But
Well, I'm not sure, but the timing of those pictures was when we had that ridiculous snowfall during the middle of the winter, and yeah, the streets were not plowed very quickly. I think that kind of happened all over town, and it happened down there too.
thank you. I have no additional questions. Are there any other questions? Hearing none and seeing none, thank you. The public hearing is
All right.
closed.
Thank you.
The matter now rests with the board. May I have a motion to approve? Mr. Story.
If I can, Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff.
Yes, you may.
Staff, on page 8, or let me go back here. On page 4, 9, AWW's sanitary sewer mains must be protected by a 30-foot wide easement. In your recommendations under resolving utility easements, under B, resolve with AWW the need for a 5-foot utility easement, it doesn't address the 30-foot easement. Is that something that would need to be added into that note?
Through the chair, Commissioner Story. So the comment on page 4 says that it just states sort of the standard that AWW must have a 30-foot wide easement centered over the main, and then the second sentence is what they need, an additional 5-foot easement is required. And so that's what I've reflected in the condition. But then also when we phrase something as resolved, that always gives the reviewing agency the leniency to figure out exactly how to resolve that need.
I was just surprised that it has the 5-foot utility easement in there. It appears that the water main is, I don't know, just estimating on there, maybe 6 feet away from that property line, and it looks like there may be another 24 feet required there to cover that, or 11 feet, 10 feet to cover that utility main.
Through the chair, Commissioner Story, you may be right. I didn't go back and question their comments, but they do have the flexibility when I phrase it as resolved with AWW, the need for if they can figure out exactly what kind of easement they need.
And then I would assume that would cover note 12 where ML&P requires a 10-foot telephone electric easement along the north property boundary.
Through the chair, Commissioner Story, on all of our plats, we always include as a very first condition resolving utility easements. And this is just a broad condition that always gives all utility companies sort of a final chance to get any easements that they need. And so that is condition A.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff? Hearing none, seeing none, may I have a motion for approval of the variances from AMC 21.80, 300B, the design standards for lot width and dedication for the streets, AMC 21.80.010, and also the right-of-way width. Please. Mr. Kinge.
In case S11909-1, I move to approve the variances from AMC 21.80.300B and AMC 21.80.010 and AMC 21.85. The right-of-way. I also move to approve the plat for 18 months subject to,
That'd be separate. Thank you. Mr. Fuller seconds. Mr. Kinge, would you speak to your motion, please?
In the case S11909-1, it appears that the four standards have been met, supported in fact by not only comments from staff in the report, comments from the petitioner, as well as facts regarding each specific variance. I specifically want to point out a couple of them here today just based on the size of the lots. I find that they're adequate to provide the variance. I find that with regard to the safety issues, I feel that the fire department has no objections to this. Therefore, I don't feel that the need to stick to this, to the adequate findings of the right-of-way, I believe, have been met based on that comment of the fire department and staff also. Hopefully I don't think I was very clear there, but.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller seconds this. Are there any other discussion? Mr. Kinge, or excuse me, Mr. Cole. Sorry.
Well, I expect that that I'm going to be speaking on my own on this, but I do not intend to vote to approve this variance request, and I want to put it on the record as to why. I don't have any problem with the variance of the right-of-way width, but I would not find that the burden has been met to approve a variance request that the depth of the lot shall be at least 100 feet. I've looked at the justification that's been put in here, and I don't find that it's any different from any of the other. There's nothing that is special about this particular lot, in my opinion, that would support subdividing it, and I don't see the inherent right, or I'm not aware of an inherent right if someone has to subdivide it. It was one, and so I would not find that there had been the burden on either 1, 2, 3, or 4 on that particular issue, and I'm also troubled by the fact that the traffic division specifically noted that it did not find that specific or strict compliance with the ordinances was overly burdensome. And I don't accept when a petitioner tells me that they were aware of the concerns and didn't look into it, and I didn't find staff's explanations of why the traffic division didn't answer their question satisfactory. So that's my intention.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Are there any other findings? Mr. Fuller.
I see the depth of 100 feet in the condition of being sideways versus vertical. The square footage of the lot is substantially greater than many other lots that are being constructed in town today, and where they're limiting themselves to 5 units per lot versus 15 or greater for the whole, seems that that's going to be a benefit to the whole neighborhood. So I'll be supporting it.
Are there any other comments or discussion? I want to go on record that I agree with the staff's findings and for the conditions being met. I'm not going to read them, but they're listed on page number 6 and 7 of our packet. And since there is opposition, this matter will go to vote. A positive vote approves this, and a negative vote denies this motion. The motion passes. May I have a motion in the matter of case S11909-1 for approval of the plat? Mr. Kange makes the motion. Would you make your motion, please?
Sure. In case S11901-1, I move to approve the plat for 18 months, subject to the following conditions listed on page 8. Conditions, looks like A through E.
And Mr. Abel seconds. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the Board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on record unless a written request is submitted to the Department of Community Development Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or an appeal of the Board's final appealable decision per AMC 2130. The next case is S11919-1 Murray Subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a preliminary plat for subdivision of lots 1, 2, and 3, Block I, Murray subdivision, into one lot with the vacation of a 60-foot right-of-way known as Ashwood Street, located along the west petition site boundary. The reason for this platting action is the petitioner's desire to move this property in the direction of conformity with Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21. The petitioner is proposing two options with regard to the vacation of Ashwood Street. The first option revolves around the 60-foot vacation, the full 60-foot vacation of Ashwood Street, and option number 2 is for the vacation of the eastern 30 feet of Ashwood Street. Just to give you a brief history of the platting background in this area. In 1982, the Platting Board approved the vacation of Ashwood Street for blocks I and J of Murray subdivision, as referenced in case S6426. It appears that each property owner was required to file individual plats reflecting the vacation approval. While a few property owners filed plats, the majority did not, and the vacation approval expired. There have been several properties in the area that have filed those plats, and then several came back years later and filed plats. So there have been a few properties along this right-of-way who have vacated Ashwood Street. The proposed lot is zoned B3, General Business District. It meets the B3 district requirements for lot size and width and is considered a conforming lot of record. There are two types of landscaping that would be required with this subdivision. The first is screening landscaping adjacent to the Seward Highway in accordance with AMC 2145-125C3. And the second is buffer landscaping adjacent to the residentially zoned properties to the east. It's known as Pond subdivision. They're single families and buffer landscaping would be required along that property boundary. The petitioner is requesting for the vacation of Ashwood Street. As I mentioned earlier, he is proposing two options. Staff has reviewed both options and finds that option number 2 is found to generally conform to the municipal vacation policy. The state of Alaska has expressed their interest in the westerly 30 feet of this right-of-way and objects to the vacation of the full 60 feet of right-of-way. Reviewing agencies had either no objection to this vacation request or have deferred to the state of Alaska and support their need for the westerly 30 feet of this right-of-way. The right-of-way is not constructed and not needed for traffic circulation. The lots obtain access from the frontage road of the new Seward Highway, also known as Brayton Drive. The easterly 30 feet of this right-of-way appears to be access to municipal need. Staff has no objection to the vacation of municipal interest in the easterly 30 feet of right-of-way known as Ashwood Street. With that being said, staff would like to recommend approval of the vacation of the easterly 30 feet of a 60-foot right-of-way known as Ashwood Street, subject to recording of a suitable plat within 18 months, and approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions 1 through 8 on pages 8 and 9 of your staff packet. I would like to make one revision, condition number B2, which states entering into a mainline extension agreement with AWU for the required extension of public water and sewer to this property. I would like to revise that to state, quote, resolving the need to enter into a mainline extension agreement with AWU for extension of public sewer to this property, end quote. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Any questions at all? Hearing none and seeing none, we will ask the petitioner's representative, would you please state your name, spell your last name for us, please, and would you like to reserve some time for a rebuttal?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Ken Ayers, A-Y-E-R-S. I'm with Lonsberry & Associates, representing the petitioner, Nick Brest, who is also here tonight. I'd reserve a minute of rebuttal time, I guess, at this time. I think one thing I would like the board to keep in mind tonight is that Mr. Brest bought this property and it has a lot of non-conforming issues with current code. He's trying very hard to bring this property into conformance with code to the best of his ability. So having said that, the staff presentation and all the work that they did on this case has been tremendous. We've been working on this for months to try and get to this point. We're pretty much in agreement with everything that they have here. We would definitely appreciate the board's approval of the vacation of the east 30 feet of the 60-foot wide Ashwood Street right-of-way. We're in concurrence with that. It has definitely been found by staff to be in excess of the public need. As far as the rest of the conditions go, we concur with staff, condition 1, and to their changes to condition 2, as he stated, to resolving the need for a mainline extension agreement with AWW for the required extension of public sewer to this property. The property is served by a Class C well for the property, which is sufficient for its purposes. We would also request the board's consideration or elimination of condition number 3. The reason why we ask that is that this would be a sidewalk to nowhere. It would not connect to the sidewalk to the east because that sidewalk does not come all the way to the property line. When it would be extended along the north property line towards Brayton Drive, there's nothing for it to connect to. The other reason we would ask the board to consider that is that the State of Alaska Department of Transportation does have a project in the works for widening the Seward Highway, realigning Brayton Drive, and providing other trail access that's in the planning and design stage now, and it's going to be it's currently scheduled for construction, I think, in 2016 if it has funding. It's a very onerous condition for the petitioner to try and meet because of the cost involved, and it really doesn't serve any purpose at this time until the state brings a project through. We believe that if they're going to bring trails and sidewalk systems along Brayton Drive, that they would bring those connections along 64th if they're appropriate. At a minimum, we would request that condition number 3 be changed to resolve the need for a 5-foot concrete walkway adjacent to 64th Avenue with private development. If we can work with the State of Alaska and private development on the timing of their proposed improvements and what those might look like, maybe we can come to some agreement and work that out. So we'd appreciate your consideration of that. I'd also like to note that on condition 4, the pond subdivision to the east did provide the 10-foot buffer space adjacent to this property. They also constructed a 12-foot high fence along that property line. We would accept the condition, but we would not oppose it being eliminated either, because that space has been provided for, and it would impact the existing parking that the petitioner has, which is one of the problems he's trying to address. He's trying to provide enough parking to meet code requirements for the building. This is going to force us to go to the zoning board for a variance, possibly, but I also believe it's within the board's discretion to eliminate or modify that condition. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes and 55 seconds for rebuttal. Are there any questions of the petitioner? None at this time. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Fuller. Thank you.
Yes, through the chair, please. The additional 30 feet, as I can see on this photo overlay, what is the state? I mean, you're not even close to Brayton Drive. What are their requirements going to be for that additional 30 feet? I don't understand why they just don't give you the whole 60 back.
Through the chair, Mr. Fuller, the state wanted to retain the option of doing something with that space if their project comes along with a need for it.
Do they? Do they currently have anything on drawing that says they need that for any reason at all?
Through the chairman, I have not seen any preliminary design plans from the state for that area.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the petitioner? Mr. Whitfield.
Through the chair, Mr. Fuller, just to kind of expound upon what Mr. Ayers said, the state of Alaska is planning, and you may have seen it, they're working on the Seward Highway expansion project, and there is plans in the works. They're in the design phase right now to expand the new Seward Highway abutting Mr. Brest's property. They have been unable to really determine to what extent they'll need that right-of-way, whether it's for drainage, whether it's for a paved surface roadway. We're not sure. So that's really the extent of what we know from the state, and they've been adamantly opposed to a full 60-foot vacation from the very beginning. So I'll just put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the petitioner? None. Thank you. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Edmondson.
Through the chair, Mr. Ayers, I got a question in regards to the sidewalk. Did I hear you correctly in saying that the sidewalk that requesting along East 64th would not connect to another sidewalk? Is there not? Would it not connect to another sidewalk or pedestrian trail?
And through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, to my knowledge, that sidewalk does not extend all the way to our eastern boundary, so it would actually not connect at that point. There would be a gap. It's probably not very significant, but there would be a gap. I don't believe the sidewalk extends past the pond subdivision to the east. And it wouldn't connect to anything to the west. There are no trails or sidewalks anywhere along Brayton Drive.
Right on Brayton Drive. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of the petitioner, or the petitioner's representative? I don't have any others. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now open the hearing for public testimony. Is there anybody wishing to testify in this matter? Is there anybody at all? Hearing none and seeing none, we'll close the hearing to public testimony. Yes. And would you like to use your time for your rebuttal time? Okay. Are there any other questions of the petitioner? Hearing and seeing none, the public hearing portion of this, excuse me, Mr. Edmondson, yes.
Sorry, through the chair to Mr. Ayers. There was a discussion about bringing the property into conformity. How would this vacation do that?
Through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, the building sits across two lot lines right now, so that would be one issue. The property does not have enough parking on site to serve the size of the building. The vacation is going to allow us to put parking and circulation on site in front of the lot. It would also allow us some room to put in some landscaping. Along those lines, those are probably the two biggest issues are the parking and circulation.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the plan here, and it appears that a portion of the parking lot as it exists now extends into the 30, I guess it would be the very west 30 feet that would be your option 2, that the state would maintain under option 2. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, if we vacate the 30 feet for option 2, pardon me. The entire Ashwood Street right-of-way has historically been used by all those adjoining properties along Brayton Drive. Everybody's parking in it. Some of them have fenced it. Most of them have not provided their landscaping. Our plan would be to stay within the 30-foot right-of-way with the parking improvements.
So then would that bring it in conformity then with the parking requirements for the building if you just had the first 30 feet?
Through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, I'm not sure even with this 30-feet vacation if we're going to be able to provide enough parking on this site. A lot of that depends on the use of the building, so that the use of the building may end up being limited by the number of parking spaces they can provide.
Okay, I'm following you. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fuller and then Mr. Whitfield.
Yes, back to this 30 feet. On page 3A, it says that the existing 60-foot right-of-way has no street constructed in it, and most of the street right-of-way to the south has already been vacated and replaced with appropriate easements. No street construction is currently anticipated and should be, should a driveway be required, the 30-foot easement may be sufficient, but the proposed 30-foot easement is not consistent with the vacation actions to the south. Providing a 60-foot easement like that to the south, right-of-way has no objection to the entire 60-foot. They're proposing to give you 30 feet, but then you got to turn around and make 30 feet of landscape. So you really don't get any use of that unless you get the whole 60 feet.
Through the chair, Mr. Fuller, well, what we've looked at doing is working out the landscaping arrangement with municipal staff and or going to the zoning board to obtain a variance for that. There is a possibility that we could provide that landscaping within an encroachment permit. There is also the possibility, and I hesitate to bring this up, but there is some question whether or not that 30-foot screening landscaping could be required by code, because technically we don't adjoin the Seward Highway if that 30-foot to the west is still within municipal ownership. We think we have a plan worked out with staff to bring in a conforming parking and landscaping plan, and we'd be happy with the conditions and the 30-foot vacation.
Well, which would be better for you, option 1 or option 2?
To the chair, Mr. Fuller, we agree with staff as far as vacating just the easterly 30 feet of the 60-foot right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions of the petitioner's representative? Hearing none and seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the matter now rests with the board. Are there any questions for staff? Mr. Edmondson and then Mr. Fuller.
Through the chair to staff, I'm not clear at what level DOT supports vacating even the west 30 feet. I thought I saw somewhere in here where they essentially didn't support the vacation at all, but if there was a vacation to be made, they would, I suppose, be okay with the east 30 feet to be vacated.
Through the chair, Mr. Edmondson, you are absolutely correct. To be quite honest with you, the state has been reluctant to deal with us on this issue whatsoever. They are opposed to a full 60, adamantly opposed to a full 60-foot vacation. But if there is to be a vacation, the 30-foot easterly vacation would be their preferred. That would be what they would prefer. Yes, so you're absolutely correct there. You know, the right of way, the full right of way is access to municipal need. When the new Seward Highway went in, there was basically an entire subdivision that was taken, and they would be entitled by municipal policy to the west 30 feet. So they are exercising their right to that west 30 feet. The east 30 feet would normally go to the property owner that fronts that right of way. In this particular case, that would be Mr. Brest. So That's why the staff is recommending the vacation of that 30 feet. We find that the entire right-of-way is access to municipal need. However, Mr. Bress is entitled to 30 feet. Thanks.
Mr. Edmondson.
I actually think that answers my question, so thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? Hearing none and seeing none, I request a motion for approval of the vacation of the easterly 30 feet of the 60-foot wide right-of-way known as Ashwood Street. Mr. Story.
In the case S-119191, Murray subdivision, I move for the approval of vacation of the easterly 30 feet of the 60-foot wide right-of-way known as Ashwood Street, subject to recording in the suitable plat within 18 months of approval.
Thank you. And Mr. Cole seconds. Mr. Story, would you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, based on the staff's testimony and the written testimony contained on page 7, and also the written testimony contained on page 47 and 48, which are the comments from the Department of Transportation, I feel that the standards have been met and conform to the municipal code.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. May I have an additional motion to approve the plat? Okay. With the proposed change for condition 2, resolving the need for a mainline extension, Mr. Story moves and Mr. Cole is planning on seconding. Mr. Story, would you speak to your motion, please?
In case S-119119-1, I moved for the approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions 1 through 8, with the modification to condition number 2 to include resolving the need for entering into a mainline extension agreement with AWW for the required extension of public sewer to this property. I would also like to make a modification to note number 3 to read resolving the need for a 5-foot concrete walkway adjacent to East 64th Avenue with private development.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, do you still wish to second? Mr. Cole seconds. Mr. Story, would you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, again, based on the staff's testimony and the petitioner's testimony and the written testimony were contained in our packet, I feel that the recommendations from staff are appropriate for this case.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion, comments? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing none and seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. I want to remind everyone that any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions as governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Department of Community Development Planning Division prior to expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or an appeal to the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. The next case is S11921-1 Fairview Subdivision Extension Number 1. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a preliminary plat and request for subdivision of tracts 1, 4, 8A, 10, and Lot 9A into two tracts. Fairview subdivision into two tracts of land for proposed tracts 1A and 8B, Fairview subdivision extension number 1, with the vacation of a portion of Park Lane right-of-way and cul-de-sac, the vacation of a 30-foot driveway easement along the south property line of tracts 4 and 10, and the vacation of a 10-foot drainage easement along the shared property line between tracts 8A and 9A, and Lot 9A. The petition site is a location of the former Park Lane bowling alley, located north of the Glen Highway, south of Mountain View Drive, west of Bunn Street, and east of Cleven Street. Petition site is zoned B3 General Business District. The proposed tracts meet the B3 district requirements for lot size and width and are considered a conforming lot. A site plan review and conditional use public hearing for a self-storage, vehicle storage, and containerized storage facility was heard this last Monday, June 4th, at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and was approved. There are two types of landscaping required on this property: buffer landscaping in accordance with AMC 2145 125C2 shall be required along the east property boundary adjoining residentially zoned property. The petitioner is required to dedicate a 10-foot buffer landscaping easement along this boundary. Visual enhancement landscaping is required in accordance with AMC 2145 125C1 along all lot lines that adjoin a commercially zoned property. A dedicated 8-foot visual enhancement landscaping easement is required along those lot lines. Park Lane is currently a strip paved section. This right-of-way development does not meet municipal code standards for urban improvement area along the property frontage. The petitioner is required to enter into a subdivision agreement for the required improvements to include a 24-foot wide paved street with type 2 rolled curb and gutter on the subdivision side. The petitioner is requesting vacation of a 60 by 270 foot portion of Park Lane, a 30-foot driveway easement on proposed tract 1A, and a 10-foot drainage easement on proposed tract 8B. The vacation requests have been reviewed and found to conform to the municipal vacation policy and ordinance. I'll speak to each vacation request separately. The vacation of the 60 by 270 foot portion of Park Lane. A portion of the vacated right-of-way will be incorporated into proposed tract 8B, which is owned by Cook Inlet Housing Authority, the co-petitioner in this case. The remaining portion will be incorporated into proposed tract 1A, which is owned by ESM Properties and the petitioner in this particular case. A 32 by 230 foot access easement is being dedicated by this plat to serve the proposed tract 8B to ensure access. Reviewing agencies had either no comment or no objection to this vacation request. However, private development did note that the proposed hammerhead turnaround is not an acceptable design alternative. A condition of approval has been added to resolve the geometric design and location of that turnaround. This portion of Park Lane appears to be access to municipal need. The 30-foot driveway easement on proposed tract 1A. This easement extends across tracts 7A to the west and was established to provide access from Cleven Street to the existing tract 1 prior to the construction of Park Lane. This property is now provided access from a constructed right-of-way, Park Lane, and appears to be access to municipal need. All reviewing agencies had either no comment or no objection to this request. The 10-foot drainage easement on proposed Tract 8B. This easement bisects existing Tract 8A and Lot 9A. Since this tract and lot are being combined with this platting action, there is no longer a need for this easement. All reviewing agencies had either no comment or no objection to this request. That being said, the department would like to recommend approval of the 3 vacation requests, subject to resolving with private development, traffic, and fire plan review the geometric design and location of the cul-de-sac for Park Lane, and recording a suitable plat within 18 months. We'd also like to we'd also like to recommend approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions 1 through 6 on pages 9 and 10 of your staff packet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Hearing none and seeing none, we're going to open the public hearing. The petitioner has 10 minutes and may ask to save time for rebuttal. Groups have 5 minutes, individuals have 3 minutes. Would you please state your name and spell your last name for us, please?
Yes, my name is Melissa Branch, B-R-A-N-C-H. I'm representing the petitioner. I'm with Enterprise Engineering, and the petitioner is Matt Bobich with ESM Properties, and he's with me. We have no objection to staff recommendations and are working to resolve them, so we would like to just save the time to answer any questions or closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions of the petitioner's representative? Don't see any. Thank you. Is there anybody wishing to testify tonight? Would you please come forward, state your name, and spell your last name, please?
Yes, my name is Jeff Barton, B-A-R-T-O-N. I reside at 117 North Bund. We are concerned about the possibility of business in the road extension having access through the neighborhood. We have owned our house in 117 North Bund since 2003 and had multiple issues with the neighborhood of the old bowling alley area there with loud noise, fights, and all other acts. Our main concern is excess traffic going into our subdivision. We bought the house there due to the fact that the limited access to the area, and since we've been there, they changed the 2 main roads coming into our little subdivision down there, North Lane and Bliss onto Ames, and we have one little area down there. With them open, with the rest of the property, we have no problem with just the access to our neighborhood due to the increase of traffic and people towing vehicles. We have young children play down in that area, and we took a lot of effort to clean up the area down there to make it safe and a nice area for our children to live. One concern due to the traffic area, when the road Bliss comes down and turns into Ames, it restricts down, and we're concerned about the traffic, people towing stuff through there. And North Lane is a one-way out. You can't come down in that area. So we're mostly concerned about the excess traffic to that area and our children playing down in that area.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any questions for Mr. Barton? Nobody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify? Then you're allowed time for rebuttal.
Okay. Mr. Barton and the board, I think I can put his concerns to rest in that the only access off of Bunn and Ames in the residential neighborhood is emergency access. So we have a site obscuring fence and the landscaping that's going to be there. There's going to be a break where Bunn and Ames come together with a locked gate and a Knox box just so that fire can have access. So no traffic to the mini storage facility will come through that neighborhood at all. Everything will come down through Park Lane.
Thank you.
Can I answer your question, sir?
I'm sorry. unless anybody from the board has direction, you're only allowed to testify once. Are you finished with rebuttal?
I am.
Are there any additional questions for the petitioner's representative? There are none. The public hearing portion of this is closed, and this matter now rests with the board. Are there any questions of staff? Hearing none and seeing none, I request a positive motion for approval. Okay. We need to approve each requested vacation separately. Mr. Cole is going to make a motion, and I would request that you make this for item number A on page 8, the approval of vacation for the 60-foot by 270-foot. Thank you.
In the case of S11921-1, Fairview Subdivision Extension Number 1,
I would move for the approval of the vacation of a 60-foot by 270-foot portion of the right-of-way known as Park Lane to include the cul-de-sac, subject to resolving with private development, traffic, and fire plan review the geometric design and location of the cul-de-sac for Park Lane in lieu of a proposed hammerhead, and recording a suitable plat within 18 months of approval.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller, seconds. Would you speak to your motion, please?
Based upon the information that's been provided in our package, F.1-C, the fact that there have been no oppositions, and the testimony today, I think the record supports the motion as it stands right now.
Thank you. Are there any additional discussions? Are there any additional findings? Is there any opposition to the motion? I too wanted to chime in that it appears that the conditions have been met to approval of the vacation as stated on page 8 of our packet. Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. And may I have a motion for the next item, item B? Mr. Cole moves.
Again, in the case of S-11921-1 Fairview Subdivision, I would move for the approval of the vacation of a 30-foot driveway easement on proposed track 1A and the 10-foot drainage easement on proposed track 8B, subject to recording a suitable plat within 18 months of approval.
Thank you. And Mr. Edmonton seconds. Mr. Cole, will you speak to your motion, please?
Again, based upon the proposal or the package that we received in support of this, the testimony specifically directed to page 8, the factors set forth in the middle of the page, I believe the record supports the approval of this vacation of the easements.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or comments? Are there any additional findings? Any additional findings that would support this vacation? Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. And I request a motion for approval of the plat for 18 months, including the conditions on page 8 and 9. Mr. Cole?
In the case of S11921-1 Fairview subdivision, I would move for the approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions 1 through 6 at pages 9 and 10 of our package.
Thank you. Mr. Edmondson seconds. Is there any comments or discussion? Or any questions? Are there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. And I want to remind everyone in the, here tonight that any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the Board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made final on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Department of Community Development Planning Division prior to the expiration date of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503 or an appeal of the Board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. Okay, we have no persons to be heard tonight, so we are at reports. And the report that we have in front of us is regarding findings, and that was put in front of us tonight on our table. And Jill is going to address this for us. Thank you.
I just have a quick statement, and I will provide this in copies to the Platting Board. It's an old memo, but it's kind of appropriate because it's addressed to the Platting Board members as well as Mr. Weaver, because they were concerned that the board was spelling out every finding and every condition. Carefully reciting the standards for variance, for example, and reaching a conclusion about them on the record. And in making that conclusion...
Excuse me, would you, in the back of the room, mind taking the conversation outside so we can finish our business? Thank you.
What I think I'll do is just read the memo real quickly for you. It is recently, this is from Sandra Wicks, who was Assistant Municipal Attorney at the time, and it basically said, it has recently come to my attention that in your effort to follow my earlier exhortation that the boards and commissions make findings of facts were required, a step in the process may have been overlooked. I have seen in transcripts of decisions that you are now carefully reciting the standards for variances, for example, and reaching a conclusion about them on the record. I noticed, however, that in making the conclusion, no facts about the case were recited to support the conclusion. You should always tie facts brought out in the hearing to your conclusions. For instance, you might use one of the following formula. I find that blank constitutes a special circumstance affecting the property, or something. I find that granting of this variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property in the area because. Keep in mind the three purposes for making findings and that should help you judge whether the findings made for a particular decision are adequate. Those purposes are to inform potential appellants of the reasoning of the board so that they may formulate an appeal if necessary. Present in concise form the reasoning of the board so that a judge on review of the case can determine whether the law was properly applied and where there was substantial evidence for the decision. And encourage boards to make carefully reasoned decisions by requiring a clear statement of the reasons for the decision. And in addition to that, we provided you with a copy of the Platting Board Code with regard to your decisions, and the findings of facts are at the beginning of that. And attached is the document called Findings, What, Why, and How. Those are what we generally give to new board members and commissioners on their orientation. And we may have additional further information later for you, but that's a start in response to your request, although I noticed Ms. Moses isn't here to hear that.
Are there any comments or discussion or questions? Mr. Story.
I have a comment in regards to conflict of interest and disclosures. Each time that we do disclosures, it's, I guess, sometimes, I mean, I work for R&M Consultants. We've been in business since 1969. I've been working for them since 1979 and have done a lot of work in Anchorage with a lot of different people. And, you know, when I sit here and see out in the audience with Ken Ayers used to work at R&M and Mark Ide used to work at R&M, I know Mike Horn and a lot of people. We've done a lot of work here. So, you know, I don't feel that I have a conflict of interest with some of these projects that I know about. You know, I don't have a personal interest or any financial interest in them, although, you know, our company does have term contracts with the municipality of Anchorage for reviewing plats. We have term contracts with DOT for right-of-way services for acquisition and relocation. Not specific to the plats that are on here, and I would certainly disclose that information at the time, but when these cases are brought up, you know, there's some touch that I have had or knowledge of them at some point in time, and I would disclose that if I felt that there was an interest, but I know that other board members disclose information even if they have any bit of knowledge of it. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing without, you know, I don't feel that I do, so I don't disclose it, but is that a decision for the chairman or for the board to make rather than my own personal feeling whether it's a conflict or not?
There's definitely a difference, of course, between a conflict and a disclosure. And in some of the other boards and commissions, they have kind of like some of the commissioners who have developed properties, for instance, or in UDC where they are, it's their firm. They have sort of like the standard phrase they use to disclose that they've done business in the past, but they have no interest in the current case. They're not working on the current case. It's just disclosing for the record that you've had, you know, that your companies in the past dealt with the petitioner's representative. It does not necessarily require a motion to direct you to participate unless you're, I would say, actually working on the case or your firm is involved in some way that might have a financial or personal impact.
Yes, and in the past I've actually recused myself from those types of cases. And just like tonight, you know, I knew most of the petitioners in the audience, and they either work for us or I've known them personally. So I don't feel that that's a conflict of interest or something that I, you know, would have a motion for the board to determine whether I should participate or not.
I think there's a real distinction between a disclosure and a conflict of interest, and I think that you have the conflict of interest completely understood and you're following those procedures. I couldn't fault you for that. For the disclosures, I think that you should use your discretion, as all of us should, because it's possible that somebody could know that wants to appeal, that could know that you had a business relationship with one of the presenters, and if you don't disclose that, that could be used in the appeal hearings. And it's easier to me, I'm just consistently disclosing, even though I don't consider these conflicts of interest, I just consider most of them disclosures.
Yes, and I don't know if, each time we come up here that we want to disclose every, we could be here for some time. And I know Trevor's been probably involved in a lot of things, and I don't know other individuals, but I would assume that it's the same. I mean, most of us have been in Anchorage for some time and know a lot of people and a lot of projects, so we could sit up here maybe all night and do disclosures, but, I use my own discretion on that, but I know that others, same thing with, going through the findings of facts. I'm just using that, but I just want to make sure that, knowing somebody in the crowd, do I need to make a disclosure that Mark Guide used to work for us or Ken Ayers? I don't feel that that's a good use of our time.
And you just take into public perception is really what Mr. Young is referring to, and with the public's perception, and that's again something that you have to draw conclusions on yourself and base your disclosures on that. And I think refer to the ethics code never hurts, and you'll get a refresher. You're supposed to get refresher documentation at least once a year, and I think that's coming up soon.
Is there any other discussion on findings of fact and disclosures? I'll step forward and say thank you, Jill, for doing the research and bringing this forward. It's appreciated. Are there any other questions? Discussion? How about a motion to adjourn? Can we have one of those? Okay, Mr. Edmondson motions, Mr. Story seconds. The meeting is adjourned.